What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Paddock, and today we're going to talk about how to improvise using any scale. Before we dive into the video, I'd like to take a second to welcome everybody to the P. Mauriat North America Saxophone Master Class, where we talk about all things saxophone. Today, we're going to tackle the subject of basic improv and talk about how to improvise using a scale. Improvisation can be a really tough subject for some people because the idea of making something up from scratch can be really tough. It's like, what notes do I play? What rhythms do I play? How do I know what to play? Another part of it is a lot of the advice out there is by really advanced, super professional saxophone players who are telling you really advanced, super professional saxophone player ideas on how to improvise. So what I'm going to do is break it down into really simple terms that are really easy to follow so you can turn a major scale, or any scale for that matter, into an improvisation idea. So let's start off with the definition of improvisation, which is spontaneous composition. All that means is making up something that is not written down. And the way you do that is you take a scale or a chord and you plug it into a cool rhythm. That's pretty much how simple it is. I know there's all this advice about play from your soul and transcribe as much as you can, and those things are awesome, and I definitely recommend doing both of those. But when you're just trying to figure out how to play your first solo, that advice doesn't really apply. So the first thing you need to do is figure out how to get a scale to sound like an improvisation idea. So that is what we're going to work on today. To do that, we are going to use our G major scale on the saxophone, on the alto saxophone. That would be a C major scale for the tenor saxophones. So we're going to play a G major scale in a jazz style. So to have swing eighth notes because we're going to be improvising in a jazz style. So it'll sound like this. So that is the scale that we're going to start with. This is the G major scale. And we're going to take small steps and turn it into a cool musical improv idea. So the first step of turning this scale into an improv idea is to just change the rhythm of the scale. So instead of just playing straight eighth notes, we're going to play some notes longer, some notes shorter. Pretty simple, right? So we're taking that major scale and we're just switching the rhythm to try and come up with something more interesting. That already sounds way cooler than just a major scale, right? That's all improv is taking notes and plugging them into cool rhythms. So in this example, we're going to take the notes in the G major scale and we're going to plug it into cooler rhythms. Okay, so now that we're playing the G scale with a different rhythm, this time we're going to play beyond the G. So we're not just going to play it one octave. We're going to go up higher above the top G and down lower below the low G, just to use more of your horn. So it'll sound like this. So that's your first step to improv, is just changing up those rhythms, getting used to playing something different that's not written out. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to play the exact same thing, except this time we're going to repeat a couple notes. And it doesn't matter what note you choose to repeat, and you can repeat it more than once. You can repeat it 2 or 3 times, 4 times, whatever. So you might repeat the B, you might repeat the D. As long as it's a note in the G scale, it doesn't matter. So it'll sound like this. So it's already sounding cooler. Now, obviously, that's not the coolest solo in the world, but this is just our second step in taking our major scale and turning it into improv ideas. The next step is going to give us a lot more direction, because what we are going to do is we're going to change the direction of the scale. So instead of just playing straight up and then straight down, we're going to snake our way through the scale. So in other words, we're going to play up a couple notes, then down a couple notes. Up some more notes, down more notes. So instead of just doing a straight line, we're going to be doing like this with our notes. So it'll sound like this. You hear like I'm going up and then coming down. Up and then down. I'll do it again. And this time I'll move my horn around a little bit so you can see when I'm moving. When I'm snaking up and going down. So it's starting to sound more like improv with every step that we add. Now the next step is we are going to do the exact same thing that we just did. So we're going to snake our way through the scale, but this time we're going to jump to different notes in the scale. So it's not all going to be scale-wise motion. Scale-wise motion meaning going up the scale, G, A, B, C, D, with all the notes right next to each other. So we're going to play some scale-wise motion, jump to a note, then play more scale-wise motion, jump to a note, play some more scale-wise motion. So it'll sound like this. Did you hear I was playing some notes? I would jump to a scale degree and then play some more notes. Sometimes ascending, meaning going up. Sometimes descending, meaning going down. So we're just kind of jumping around in the scale, but we're still playing that G major scale. Take a listen one more time. You hear that? We've got all this motion going on. And all we did is we took our major scale, we changed the rhythm, then we repeated some notes, then we snaked through the scale a little bit, and now we're just jumping to different notes in the scale. The next step is to add some intervals into your improv lines. Intervals meaning like a third or a fourth or a fifth. So in the key of G, a G to a B would be a third, a G to a C would be a fourth, a G to a D would be a fifth, but we're going to stick with the third to get started just because it's a really approachable interval, and it also is the interval that builds our chord, and it's going to sound good pretty much no matter what you do. So we're going to stick with the interval of a third. So I'm going to jump in some thirds. So I might go G, B, then when I'm on my A, I go from A to C, because that's a third, A, B, C. If I'm on my B, I might jump from B to D. I'm just going to jump around in some thirds. So that definitely makes it sound more like improvisation than just playing a scale, because I'm jumping around a lot more and I'm using those intervals, which makes it have a lot more shape to it than just sounding like a major scale. Now, the beauty of the thirds is when we stack these thirds, we get a chord. A chord means the first, the third, the fifth, and the seventh degrees. Degrees meaning notes in the scale. So if we stack these thirds, we have G, B, D, and F sharp. And that would be your G major 7 chord. It would sound like this. And all those notes are based on the interval of the third in the key of G major. So we can also use that in our improv, and that's going to actually sound really good because those are our chord tones. And the chord is kind of a shortened version of the scale. It's the most important notes in the scale. So if we use those notes, the G, B, D, and F sharp in the key of G, it's just going to make everything sound better. It's going to lock everything into the chord and the key that we're in, and it's just going to give everything more direction. So take a listen to it. I'm going to use chord tones and jump in intervals of a third. You hear that? I did that chord tone to start it. I just stack thirds, G, B, D, F sharp, A. That's all, we're just stacking thirds. Now, if we add the repeat a note into this, it's gonna make it sound really good. So let's put all of the rules together. We are going to snake through the scale. We are going to jump around in the scale. We are going to use the interval of a third and bring out our chord tones. And of course, repeat some notes. Improvisation. We're just taking the notes that we know fit, which in this case is the G major scale, and we're coming up with rhythms and ideas by using intervals and snaking our way through the scale. Now, if you have noticed, all of my ideas have sounded somewhat similar, and the reason for that is because everything I have played so far starts on the root. In other words, it starts on the 1. Everything I have played, every idea I played has started on a G. And that is a good way to make everything sound boring. So if you want your solos and your improv to sound more interesting, you want to start on different degrees. Degrees, again, meaning notes in the scale, of the scale. So really good ones to use are chord tones, which again are G, B, D, and F sharp. So this time I'm going to start my idea on the third, which is a B. This time I'm going to start on the fifth, which is a D. And this time I will start on the seventh, which is the F sharp. And the last concept that we're going to use is throwing some patterns in. Patterns just mean repeated stuff. So the first pattern that we're going to use is a rhythmic idea using a G and F sharp. We can do the same thing with G, A, B. I'm going to use those three notes, which are your first three notes, and come up with a pattern. Or we could do the opposite. We could go B, A, G. So when we throw patterns in with all the other steps that we used to create this improvisation, it definitely gets you some more solid ideas, and it sounds a lot more like improv and a lot less like scales. So this is what the whole thing would sound like. Did you hear how when I threw those pattern ideas in there, the solo, the improv really came alive? Like you could hear the idea as opposed to it just sounding like a scale. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about is phrasing. In the beginning, when you're doing improvisation, you want to think about two-bar phrases. Two-bar phrases are the complete sentence in music. So this is what a two-bar phrase sounds like. Sounds like a complete thought. Right? That sounds like a complete thought. So when you're improvising, you want to have two-bar phrases and connect your two-bar phrases. So a lot of times it's going to sound like a question phrase of 2 bars and an answer phrase of 2 bars. Take a listen. It'll be the question and the answer. So the title of this video is How to Improvise Using Any Scale, and I've spent almost the whole video using the G major scale. The good news is all of these concepts work for any scale that you're playing. We're going to use the exact same concepts this time with the D Mixolydian scale, which would be on your D7 chord. So it'd be D to D with just the F sharp and a C natural. So this is what the scale would sound like. Then we change the rhythm of the scale. Then we change the rhythm of the scale and we go beyond the roots. Then we snake our way through the scale. Then we jump to some notes. Then we throw in some intervals. Then, of course, we make sure that we don't always start on the root. Then we throw in some patterns. And that's it. Those are the steps that you use to turn pretty much any scale into basic improvisation.